Former President Jacob Zuma is to face prosecution for 16 charges of corruption. The Director of Public Prosecutions confirmed on Friday afternoon. This comes after years of legal battles and more than $1.2 million of taxpayers' money spent on Zuma's legal fees. CGTN's Yolisa and Njamela has more.
Former President Jacob Zuma will finally get his day in court.
It's been a number of years now that the former president has had these charges hanging over his head. On numerous occasions, Zuma has told South Africans that he wishes to have his day in court like any ordinary citizen.
On Friday, the Director of National Prosecuting Authority announced that Zuma will face 16 charges relating to fraud, corruption and racketeering. The charges relate to a 30 billion rand government arms deal in the late 1990s.
After consideration of the matter, I am of the view that there are reasonable prospects of a successful prosecution of Mr. Zuma on the charges listed in the indictment served on Mr. Zuma prior to the termination of the matter. I am of the view that a trial court would be the most appropriate forum for these issues to be ventilated and to be decided upon.
This move follows the ruling last year by the Supreme Court of Appeal, which set aside the 2009 decision to withdraw the case against the former president. A team of 5 senior state prosecutors spent 4 weeks studying Zuma's reasons why he should not have his day in court after submitting them at the end of January.
Mr. Zuma's matter has passed through the hands of all national directors, acting national directors and deputy national directors of public prosecutions in one way or another since the investigation into Mr. Zuma's alleged unlawful conduct first commenced.
The prosecution's boss has already informed the former president.
The Director of Public Prosecutions, KwaZulu-Natal, will facilitate the necessary processes for Mr. Zuma and his co-accused to appear in court.
It's understood that more than 200 witnesses have already confirmed their availability to testify once Zuma's case goes on trial. The governing ANC says it has noted the decision. Other opposition parties welcomed it. Yolisa and Njamela, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
Well, to get more insight on this, we are joined by CGTN's Angelo Coppola in Johannesburg, South Africa. Angelo, some of these charges go back to the 1990s. What's changed? Why does the chief prosecutor feel that this time round there are, as he puts it, reasonable prospects of a successful prosecution?
Well, if one is to believe what the acting prosecutor or the NPA boss at the time, Advocate Mokatedi Nche, had to say, he's the guy who overturned the original decision to prosecute Zuma. He blames circumstances. He's saying that at the time he made the decision based on circumstances that were available to him, and he stands by that decision. Of course, he was saying that the courts can reverse this decision, which is what Abrams has kind of said. In fact, he didn't reverse the decision. What's happened really is that he's confirming that those charges, those 16 charges, are still in place. And he didn't take any responsibility for making that decision that he did at that time. That's in 2009. And Abrams must be asked why he made this call. This is according to Mshe. He has his own reasons, he says, and he's convinced that at some stage Abrams will actually acknowledge what the circumstances were that made him decide to continue with those 16 charges against Zuma. So we know what it's all about. At the time, it was about the secret recordings that were considered to be illegal. Billy Downer, who was then one of the prosecutors, also stepped in, and his suggestion to reinstate the charges were also ignored. So it seems, according to Mshe, that it depends on the circumstances at the time. So nothing's changed. There's no new evidence. The recommendations that Mr. Zuma's legal team put forward didn't bring any new evidence to light, but they just talked generally about misuse and abuse of the legal system. Karen?
And Angelo, has the former president's lawyer or advisor responded to the prosecutor's statement?
Absolutely no word from the legal team at the moment. The issue really is they're probably going to evaluate the statement that was made. The conversation that was had between the NPA head Abrams and the legal team took place a little before the press conference this afternoon, as far as we understand. It was a conversation. There wasn't any documentation that was handed over. So we're going to have to wait and see how they react to it. Bottom line is that there's now a legal process that has to follow. There's going to be a summons served on Mr. Zuma via his legal team. But bear in mind that there's also a stay of execution request that's been lodged in the Cape Town High Court. And they're asking for a permanent stay on all of these charges against Zuma. It's not the first time that an NGO has stepped in to ask for these charges against Zuma to be withdrawn. But the bottom line here is, who's going to be paying for Mr. Zuma's legal fees? Because, as you mentioned at the beginning, he spent around $1.2 million of taxpayers' money to fight off his day in court, which he's now got. So we need to figure out who's going to be paying for his legal fees and how it's going to play out in the next couple of months. But everyone's saying that it could take years before this case actually gets to trial. Karen?
Okay, Angelo Coppola there in Johannesburg. Thank you for that update.